introduce a couple of our guests. We've got with us Dr. Jerry Lawrence. Dr. Jerry Lawrence, and she's on our staff, and she's a real expert in the world of Christian education, now what we call educational ministries and leadership, the EML department. And she's written in the area of faith-based development, faith formation, especially for children and families. And she's been here at Dallas Seminary a long time and has served faithfully in the career services office. So she's done a lot with resumes and interviews and placing people into churches. So welcome, Jerry Lawrence, Dr. Jerry Lawrence. And also we're pleased to have with us today, Reverend Stephen Brown. Reverend Stephen Brown is the senior pastor of Greater Bethlehem Baptist Church in East Dallas. And he has his THM degree from Dallas Seminary. We're praying about him getting his Doctor of Ministry degree or PhD degree, something like that. No pressure, of course, but we're praying along with him as he explores those opportunities, joining Dr. Jerry Lawrence, Dr. Greg Hatterberg, myself, Dr. Paul Pettit, and also Autumn Wilson is with us, our administrative assistant. She's a current THM student, and you'll be interacting with, if you haven't already, you'll be interacting with Autumn Wilson quite a bit. She helps keep our office together and helps keep the trains running on time. And she'll help solve your IT issues and your connectivity issues. You know, today everything is about connecting and logging in and logging on, and you have to have all your passwords. So I think if I get the thumbs up from Autumn, I think we're about ready to start with content because we've allowed people time to log in and we've introduced our staff. Again, both of these folks, Dr. Jerry Lawrence has served on a church staff in the family area, and Reverend Stephen Brown is a current senior pastor. So I'm always excited because these folks have been out in the field. They've really done it. I served as a youth pastor, and I like speaking to men's events, men's weekend retreats. I've done a little writing. So we try to have a variety of folks here that can help meet your needs and answer your questions. And what we're talking about is trends in career services, what's happening. And we had some data that we explored. We looked at some charts, and this gave us a real eye-opening experience about how things have changed over the last 8 to 10 years. There was a time 10, 12 years ago where there were more candidates than there were openings. And you might remember those days, lots of candidates and not a large number of openings. And just in the recent history of the pandemic and going back to some changes that we're going to talk about it, we now, at least here at the Dallas Seminary, have more openings than we do candidates. Yes, I said that correctly. We now have more openings than we do candidates. And obviously this is a trend that has been reflected out there in the marketplace. How many of you know of businesses that are saying, we're hiring? You've probably seen that. You go to a restaurant, you drive by a business, and you see so often, we're hiring. And that is sort of a trend nationwide. So it's fairly common that it would be reflected in the church world. We don't see huge swings in what's happening out there in the marketplace and also what's happening in the faith-based sector of church world. So just starting off with that data point has led us to these discussions of having more openings than there are candidates. Having more candidates than there are, I said that right. The more openings than there are candidates has led to a real shift. It's hard to keep that straight in my mind, but there are more openings than there are candidates, and that's led to a shift in the way we're doing things. Also, we're seeing some small churches, rural churches, that are having a hard time hiring because some of our candidates don't feel led or don't feel called or don't feel that they're prepared to work in a smaller environment or a rural environment. There was a day when so many of our graduates went out to small towns, rural areas. But now a lot of our candidates feel like that's a specific field or a specific training that needs to take place. So we're also working on that. And also some of our rural areas, our smaller churches, they're having a hard time keeping up with technology. You've maybe seen that. You go to a large church and there's amazing screens, amazing cameras, amazing online presence, amazing music. And then you go to a rural church sometimes or a smaller church and there's just not those resources. They may not even be streaming online yet. They may have one camera in the back of the auditorium. It may not look that well. So we're going to talk about that as we go forward, and we're going to talk about some of those trends. So openings in small churches and sometimes in rural areas. Also, second data point for me is the baby boomers are retiring. Yes, some folks that are now 62, 63, 65 years old, they're starting to say, well, I've pastored for 30 years. I've served as an associate pastor, a small groups pastor, and I'm ready to retire. And to believe it or not, there are not a ton of replacements just waiting in the wings. Some pastors say, okay, I'm retiring next summer. Reverend Brown, it's time for you to send me a replacement. Where's my replacement? And sometimes we talk about that here in our staff meetings. There are some churches that are doing a good job of leadership development, developing a pastoral pipeline, training up new people in their congregation. But to be candid, and we need to look at our own lives when we say this, most of us don't have a string of people behind us that we're discipling and training and mentoring to step into our roles. So this is another reason why we're seeing this overall trend of more openings than there are candidates, because of the baby boomers, the generation of builders who have done a faithful job of pastoring for many, many years, are now ready to hand the baton to that next person, that small group leader, that children's pastor, that youth pastor, and they're looking around saying, wow, I don't think I've personally raised up anybody to take my place. So they sometimes call our office or call these hiring agencies and ask, and the numbers just aren't as readily available as they were in the past. Well, that's a quick look at small churches, rural churches, also the trend with baby boomers and builders retiring. And I'm going to turn now to Dr. Jerry Lawrence. She's going to walk us through a little bit of this chart and also share from her experience about what she's seeing in some of the different associate pastor roles.
All right, thank you. So what we're seeing more of is the specialized roles in ministries such as children's ministry, youth ministry, a lot of parachurch ministry, and the different things, different types of positions, a wide variety of positions. Traditionally DTS was the only degree we had in our 100 years, almost 100 years, is the THM degree. And so we have been known for many years as a school that produces pastors and senior pastors specifically. But now with the different MA programs and the different specializations in ministry, we have seen more of the we've seen it more in our churches being specialized areas of ministry, and then also in our graduates specializing in different things. So if you look on this chart, the associate pastor, the youth pastor, if you just kind of look at the high points, those are the larger majority of positions that we have. But then, and then pastoral positions, but then also rising ones would be like parachurch ministry. And that has a lot of different things in it. So within parachurch is a wide variety of different ministries. And then the next one that Autumn has just circled there is associate pastor of music. And we are seeing a rise of those positions with a music position or a combination. We do see a lot of combinations, like their churches are looking for, now they're looking for a full-time ministry, but they might combine it with youth ministry and worship, or children's ministry and family ministry. And so there's a lot of combinations in order to justify a full-time position, because we know that you guys are, after so many years of being a student and graduating, you're wanting to get out and get a full-time ministry position. So in order to do that, it may be that it's a combination type of a position. So not to say that they're all that way, but some of them are that way. And I just for an example, for new positions just within the last couple of days that I've looked at have been children's ministry, media director, director of family life, a children's pastor, a director of family ministry, and a director of Christian education. So in those, you see the combinations. I do want to touch on the media. I'm not seeing where it is on this chart, but yeah, there it is. Thanks, Autumn. And media is becoming, like Paul had said earlier, our churches aren't, they're recognizing the value of and the importance of reaching our members or soon to be members of congregations through social media. So that is becoming a more important field. So shout out to our media and communications people. That would be something to shore up your knowledge on, and you will see, I think, a rise in those positions as we move forward. And if you guys have anything to add, I'd be glad to have you contribute. Oh, Paul's on mute.
Myself. I will jump in here because I'm a part of that. I'm 57 years old. When I first came here to Dallas Seminary, it was almost all THM. It was 30 years ago or so, almost all THM. And then obviously a helpful rise with Christian ed and counseling and missions. So you can see even more now the specificity and the training of media. You know, how do you run the soundboard? How do you do the lighting? How do you do the website? How do you do communication? So there are more openings now in these areas because churches want someone who's trained in those areas, but they also want them to have Bible and theology. Also, women's ministry, children's ministry, and like Dr. Lawrence said, hybrids. We want you to be halftime youth and halftime music, or halftime children and halftime missions. So be thinking about that, and don't be shy about stretching yourself, saying, I'm really good at this, but I think I could add that. So don't hold back and think, well, I'm only going to be a middle school, junior high girls pastor. Stretch yourself and open yourself up and say, I could do missions. I could help with small groups. I could help with discipleship. So be thinking about that as you're formulating your resume and doing some interviewing, and also thinking about serving in other areas.
All right, I think we will move on to Reverend Stephen Brown.
Well, good morning, everyone, depending on the part of the country you're in at this moment. I want to talk to you just about sort of the job boards that we offer. I want to give a brief personal story. When I finished Dallas Seminary way back then, I was a staff pastor at a church, and I was very content with that. I sensed the Lord calling me to the senior pastor role, but I did not know what it looked like. And so I basically had to take a step of faith. And that's really the underlying theme of what we're talking about. There may not be a cookie cutter vision fulfilled for whatever it is you have for your ministry profession. And you got to just take some steps of faith. And it may not all fall together the way you think it should, but in the fullness of time, you're going to discover that this is right where the Lord would have you to be. So I left a very comfortable situation with a staff of a huge church to be the senior pastor of a much smaller church. But it was not until I took that step was I able to see that all of the training and the years serving at this other church was really preparing me for this next season. And so my push for this kind of job board, job search thing is for you to really work hard. And that's one of the things we tell the grads when they're getting ready to graduate is you got to take complete ownership of this process. Now, our ministry opportunity listing, our job board is very concentrated. We only present to you those opportunities where churches have sort of been vetted by our theological grid. We know a little bit more about them. And so they're a safer opportunity for you. So, but our ministry opportunity listing, it is somewhat limited because we're focusing on those who are in agreement with Dallas Seminary. Now, when you want to expand your search, which we definitely challenge you to do so, you'll discover that a lot of these organizations like Vander Blumen, which is in Houston, and they're tremendous services. But as you widen that scope, you're going to be widening what may come in. And so that's important for you to know. And for many of you, you're rooted and grounded. You can handle serving pretty much anywhere. But it's important to know that when you take a step away from our ministry opportunity listing, some of the things that you may run into. A couple of things I want to share in reference to that. Our service, while it is not free, it's $40 annually. Some of these services have a tremendous fee associated with them, and that's okay. You want to invest in whatever it is this next season of your professional ministry career that you're going to be launching into. So, but be prepared, ask the specific questions. What is your fee for the services? How do you go about fulfilling those positions? And how do I know that my resume is safe with your organization? And that's why we've placed several on our website. Maybe Autumn can post those for us now from our website. But if you go to our job board, of course, you're going to begin with us, our ministry opportunity listing, which we believe is phenomenal. And I say that because you literally have control of it. You get to, you can visit it every day if you want to, but know that there are constant positions that are in the queue. So you check it on a regular basis. That's our ministry opportunity listing. Then we have these other services, which we've somewhat vetted. These are Christian-based job search organizations. And you see NL Moore, I believe they're in St. Louis, Vander Blumen, they're in Houston, and church jobs, they're all over the country. Here's the thing I want you to understand, though. There are only a certain amount of jobs out there. So it would not do you good, financially speaking, to invest in all of these different job boards. Prayerfully select you one in addition to our ministry opportunity listing so that you can have the best footing for your opportunity. Now, the thing too, you got to know is these job boards are popping up all over the place. And some of them, their practices are not in your best interest. And so that's what we want you to feel comfortable. Of course, when you come to us, Dr. Lawrence, Dr. Pettit, and myself, we do our best to get to know some of the churches. And we don't want to send you to church that's had 4 senior pastors in the last year. We won't send you there. But so we have the opportunity to get to know the ministries in a little more detail than some of these larger organizations, because they're basically, it's a numbers game for them. It's relationship for us. So those are the key distinctions in the job boards. But again, you have to work hard at this next season of your life. And it may be that during this season of searching, you'll have to find a marketplace position, just a regular job, until that ministry opportunity opens up. And that's a wonderful thing to do. You'll have the freedom of just a regular job that won't necessarily follow you home and in this meantime season. And then you'll be good to go. You'll be able to search and perfect your resume, work on your interviewing skills, and kind of get a clear understanding of those jobs that are out there. But take some time today, click on some of those job board sites that are on our website and kind of catch a glimpse of the ministry opportunities that are out there. And you'll discover that, our ministry opportunity listing is really, we're in sync with what a lot of those churches are doing, but we filtered those that are on our site to be a little more concentrated theologically with our beliefs. That's me right there. How'd I do, guys?
Very good. I knew Reverend Stephen Brown would have the very latest information, and I appreciate his ministry here because he's also at Dallas Seminary, but he's also a full-time senior pastor. He does hiring. He does these interviews. He goes out and has to, at times, look for candidates. So I love the approach he brings to our team because I'm here 40 hours a week, but he's out there mixing it up with real church folk and real church candidates. And so he's got a lot of credibility. You can call him for a phone call, or if you're in Dallas, you can meet him for a cup of coffee along with Dr. Lawrence. Now we're going to turn to Autumn Wilson, who's going to also bring us up to speed on some of our additions to our career services site and also chat a little bit about our advisors. Autumn.
Yes. So if you guys haven't been on the Career Services site recently, there have been a few changes, but a lot of really exciting changes. So I kind of just want to walk you guys through that so you know what to be looking for as you're on our site, including some of the additional resources we've added, as Reverend Brown was talking about. So if you are on the alumni website, which hopefully you guys have all had a chance to be on recently, Career Services tab is going to be one of the main tabs, and then you'll filter for alumni and students. So this is going to be a really great hub of where you can get all your career services resources. So we have find a ministry job option, vocational discernment, which is meeting with an advisor, kind of trying to figure out what you want to do, and best next steps. We also have resources on resume development, interview preparation, finances, and the process, which is a video series kind of just looking at the process in general, aptly named the process. So if you are looking to find a ministry job, this is the site just showed with Reverend Brown. We have job boards that are hosted by DTS. The ministry opportunity listing is something you guys all have access to because you're in this meeting. That's the one you guys are probably familiar with. You see that long list of jobs, new ones are added to the top. So there's also the part-time student job board. You guys probably won't really interact with this, but it's there because people want to know what our job boards are, so we have it listed. And then there's the DTS job board, which is specifically for positions at Dallas Theological Seminary. So if you are in the middle of a search and you're like, maybe I want to work at the seminary, you can find stuff there. These general church job boards are kind of the big names in finding a job. Slingshot, Church Jobs, Vanderlumen, Church Staffing, these are kind of the big four. And then NL Moore is a little bit less well known, but we have a decent relationship with them. So each of these, I may be incorrect, but I don't think any of these require a payment for you to view jobs. We've seen a really interesting change where it used to be applicants would pay for access to see jobs, and increasingly it's shifting to churches having to pay in order to see applicants. So there is this interesting power shift where now companies are kind of down and out for finding employees. So it's making it really strange, and it's really increasing the importance of relationships in finding jobs. So if you are looking for a very specific type of ministry, let's say you're looking at camp ministry, if you have a really specific focus beyond pastoral, it's always good to connect with us because we have relationships with certain camps, with higher ed jobs, but these are also great resources to look at if you kind of know what field you want to specialize in. Vocational discernment is where you can schedule an appointment with one of your advisors. So if you are one of Dr. Pettit's, you can click on this, get taken to his Calendly page, find a time to meet with him for a phone call, video call. So your advisor is at any time during business hours, you guys are able to meet with them, ask them questions, bug them, ask questions about the resume. That's what they're there for. They're experts in their fields. So never hesitate using this to schedule an appointment with any of your advisors. Resume development, hopefully you guys have had a chance to look over them. We have some templates, and you also have the option to send your resume for edits here. So where it says send for edits, we will look that over, kind of see if we have annotations or anything that we'd like to change looking at the resume. The resume is becoming increasingly important with these search resources because if churches are going through organizations, they're getting thousands of resumes. So there are some larger churches that are literally taking one glance at your resume, and that one glance is whether you move on to a deeper look or you're kind of put into the reject pile. So resumes, extremely, extremely important. Visual design for resumes is extremely popular. Resumes are not what they used to be. I will leave it at that. Interview preparation. If you make it to the interview stage, highly recommend you meet with us, kind of talk about what you're looking for in the interview, and then also what the church or ministry is looking for. And then we can also hold a mock interview so you can kind of get your feet underneath you, kind of know what you're stepping into for ministry specific interviews. So ministry interviews are weird. You're going to be asked a lot more personal questions than you would be in the corporate world. So that if you're used to the corporate world, that can be a little bit jarring. Finances and compensation. We have a really cool service where you can submit a compensation request. So let's say you are looking for a senior pastor position in a small town. Their annual budget is $100,000. We have a system where we can look at comparative salaries and tell you what you can expect for salary. So that is a really, really powerful resource, especially as you're saying, is this a fair offer that I'm being offered? Is this kind of in line with the industry? And then finally, the process series of 3 videos. One is overview of placement. You guys are kind of in the middle of placement, so hopefully that should all be review. But then Reverend Brown has a great one on qualities of a top-notch candidate, and then we have one on candidating. So kind of what that process looks like as you are visiting with churches. One last thing I will point out that I think is hidden behind this, there we go, is LinkedIn. So hopefully you guys have heard of LinkedIn. It's kind of the social media for working people. So if you do not have a LinkedIn, but you're searching for a job, I would strongly suggest you get one and start cultivating a profile. So Ben Stapley is someone who very, very active on LinkedIn. He is a pastor. He does communications work. He is a wonderful example for what it looks like. We both met to Moody, so that's how I met him. But LinkedIn kind of serves 2 purposes. It gives kind of a more formal look at your social media. So you don't have to give anyone your Facebook account. You can give them their LinkedIn. It's going to be a professional orientation to who you are. Most large churches are going to be looking for a LinkedIn. That's just the way of the world. But it'll list your experience, so it kind of serves as a resume in that way as well. And then people can also endorse you. Skills and endorsements, people can endorse you to say, hey, they do have this skill in preaching. They preached at our church. They did a great job. So this has been for a long time, but especially now in this kind of post-COVID era, more digital emphasis, LinkedIn is becoming increasingly important. So yes, I'm going to stop sharing now. So that was a really big overview of like trends and our resources that we have for you. If you have questions about LinkedIn, their advisors, me, we're great people to go to. It's a great tool, but I think Dr. Pettit, we wanted to open it up for questions.
All right. Thank you, Autumn Wilson. And you can see why we enjoy so much having Autumn on our staff. She is full of the most up-to-date information, and it's prompted me to go back and upgrade my LinkedIn. I'm sure, like me, you've thought, uh-oh, I better update my LinkedIn. So it's now time to unmute yourself. Think of a question. We're here for you. This is being recorded, so something you may ask, someone else a month from now, 2 months from now, they may watch this and say, oh, I had the same question. So don't be shy. We want you to ask plenty of questions. It can be for Reverend Stephen Brown, for myself, for Dr. Jerry Lawrence, for Autumn Wilson, or for all 4 of us, or even amongst ourselves here in our chat. We can answer this probably. Let me share one tidbit that I heard this morning on the radio. I'm driving in early this morning, and the guy says, when we come back from break, we're going to be talking about the 3-day work week. The 3-day work week. And I about drove off the road. I mean, we've all heard about the 4-day work week now, but there are some companies out there now that are saying, we just want you to work 3 days a week. And we'll have full benefits, we'll have full salary. So you can see how the marketplace is changing. There are so many openings, and there's a hunt for good talent. So especially in the IT world and the computer world, the medical world, these recruiters and these headhunters are saying, we'll even let you work 3 days a week. Now, it's not very many companies, it's just a couple of companies that are starting this, but very large companies. So be thinking about that, because it won't be long in the church world where a lot of people will be returning to the idea of bivocational education in the church, bivocational pastorships, working 30 hours a week at the church and maybe 10 hours a week at a parachurch or a part-time nonprofit. Well, let us open it up now for questions. Who will get us started? There's no such thing as a bad question. So just unmute yourself and shout out your comment or question for us.
Hi, my name is Fumi Biwonjumi.
Hello, Fumi. Go ahead. What's your question for us today?
Yes, I come across a number of the opportunities here that require that you raise your own support. For some of us that are coming from second culture, it's not what we typically are used to. You build a church and then the church take care of its pastors. So I just want to find out from you guys, what really is the trend here? Is that the general trend we should expect, or we should still search for opportunities that have very fixed and regular pays?
All right. Good question, Funmi, and welcome to our career trends session. And that's a wonderful way to get us started off, because we mostly see with churches that the church should pay for a salary. The church should provide compensation, benefits, and some, days off, things like that. I'll let Reverend Stephen Brown speak to this. I'll let Dr. Jerry Lawrence speak to this as well in autumn. But what I see is raising your own support is often with missions or those who are going overseas or a different culture. And now sometimes with parachurch and nonprofits. We're also seeing more parachurch and nonprofits that are saying, you can come work with us 40 hours a week, but you'll need to raise your own support. So I recommend it for people that have a large network. If you have lots of contacts, lots of friends and family, lots of acquaintances, maybe you've been in a church and you have lots of people in the church that are saying, we support you, we want to give a part of our tithe. Obviously, the tithes go to the church, but a part of our offering to you, that's a different story. But Funmi, if you're saying, hey, I'm living here, I don't know a lot of people, that would be a difficult task. That would be more of an uphill battle for you to try to raise up a large culture of supporters. So it's a viable ministry. It's a great way to jump into ministry, but I do say that it's mostly for people that have a large network of friends and contacts and supporters.
Yeah, and I'll jump in, Fumi. You're absolutely right. There is a upward trend of parachurch organizations asking for potential employees to raise their support. Oftentimes they'll have you come in and they may give you a grace period where they will fund your salary for an extended period of time until you can build up your support. But this is, I'm not sure if it's a post-COVID thing, but there was such a weight financially for these parachurch organizations, and they had to make the shift. I've seen it with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I've seen it with Young Life and some others, Campus Crusade for Christ, where they used to supplement salaries, but now it's only for a short season, and then boom, you are expected to raise your salary. And that is a daily part. That becomes a daily part of your ministry regimen. You're always looking for individuals to support the ministry. So that is a trend. Now, typically for staff positions at churches, it's a different story. That is, as Dr. Pettit mentioned, the church itself, it's somewhere in the budget to fund your staff. But when you step out of the church into that parachurch world, there is now the expectation to raise your staff. They'll train you, they'll empower you as best they can, but at a certain point, they'll take off the training wheels and you will be left to raise your own support. Great question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Funmi. Someone else, a question, a comment, unmute yourself and let's hear from you.
Well, this is kind of a question for everybody. Real quick, this is Paul. So hi, Paul.
We already have a Paul. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he and I always deal with this. One of the things I'm seeing is that I'm being called to a lot of wounded churches, broken churches, failing churches, however you want to describe that. A lot of the churches that are seeing interest, or that I'm seeing interest in my resume, are these churches. And I was curious of what are some ways in which I can determine their willingness to uproot from the ways they've been doing things, their willingness to make changes that are necessary to get away from that dying church.
Good question, Paul. Thank you for that. I'll go first, and then again, I'll have the other staff speak to this. We find in our office that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Okay, let me say that again. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So that's why Reverend Brown mentioned, if they've had 4 pastors in the last 2 years, you want to really go slow. You want to tap the brakes. You want to see if this is a red flag and look for that church health that I heard you talking about. Now, it doesn't mean that you necessarily don't go there. If there's there's no such thing. Prof. Hendricks used to say, there's no such thing as a perfect church. There's no such thing as a perfect church. And even if you find one, don't join it because you'll ruin it. Okay, even if it's a perfect church, once you join it, you'll help bring it down. So all of these churches are going to have strengths and weaknesses, but what we're looking for isn't an effective church. Is it a healthy church? It doesn't have to be a perfect church, but are they healthy? Are they growing? Are they moving the ball forward? Are people maybe coming to Christ? Are people getting discipled? Are people hearing the word preached? Are people worshiping? So you have every right as a candidate to investigate that. Ask other people in the community, what is this church like? Ask other people that have served there before. Can I get your opinion? I'm thinking about going to this church. We're praying about it. Would you give me some advice on this church? So all churches have strengths and weaknesses. And the final thing I would say is this: even if it's really in bad health, even if it's really hurting, some candidates have that gift of restart, replant, and they enjoy going to places that need help and shoring that up. So it takes all different types of pastors. Some pastors want to go to a growing church. Some pastors actually feel like, I want to go to a church that's hurting and I want to help them. It's called a turnaround pastor, a turnaround church. So those would be my pieces of advice, and I'll let the other staff people speak to this issue as well.
Well, real quick before anybody else speaks, really, I am seeing that I am that. For those of you who know me, I was a medic when I was in the Army, and I'm still a medic now. And that's what I'm finding out, is that I'm really called to be that pastor who helps the church get out of that unhealthy stuff. But what I'm trying to figure out is, how do I figure out if the elders and if the team are willing to make the changes that are necessary. That's what I'm really trying to figure out, how to figure out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't. Oh, Dr. Pettit?
No, I was going to turn it to you, because wouldn't you say maybe you would have permission to talk to someone who's served on that staff before, or maybe would I have permission to speak to the person who I'll be replacing? But what would you say, Reverend Brown?
I think the biggest challenge is, there are no guarantees, Paul. There are no guarantees. The church can tell you, oh yeah, we want change. We want to be vibrant again. We want to be, and as soon as you move that pulpit, you'll discover, they really, but I think every church kind of goes through this. The church where I pastor, it's an 89-year-old church, and they made a commitment. They wanted to reach a younger generation. And as soon as we began to implement some changes, we discovered they do want to reach younger generations, but just not that badly. And I mean, I asked every question I could ask. I met with all the different committees and leadership, and, change just takes time. And so you got to pace yourself. There may be some red flags going in that you want to adhere to, but if the general consensus is, we realize we have some unhealthiness, we think you are the guy to help us with this, please partner with us to impact this change, it's a step of faith. But there are no guarantees. And I don't think there's a way you can go in knowing 100% sure, will this church implement some of the recommendations that I make? It just takes time. Great question, though.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, good question. And it just also takes time to build up that credibility, like, hey, he's served here several years. We trust him to make this change for us. All right, other folks here, let's hear from you. Unmute yourself and shout out a question. Again, we're recording this. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we will be using this in the future. So other people are going to log on later and watch these questions. So maybe it's something you've been wondering about in hiring, church trends, placement, resumes, interviewing. Who has a question for us or a comment?
Hi, everyone. Jason here. I've been looking on the MOL listing of opportunities. And for those of us who are looking for pastoral jobs overseas, maybe Europe, Africa, Asia, Middle East, there don't seem to be a lot right now. And I'm wondering if that's a normal state for this platform, or if that changes over time. And if it if it's normally low, is there a specific church finding ministry that you think does a good job of international placements? And that's not like sending a missionary. I mean, a church that's kind of hiring a pastor.
I'll go first, and then I want to call on my colleague, Dr. Lawrence, because she has a lot of family that are involved in missions. But what we find, Jason, is we receive sometimes senior pastor openings for what we call an international church. It's in Nairobi, Kenya, but it's not necessarily in Swahili, or it's not necessarily for a local rural congregation. It's sort of an international church, and they're looking for oftentimes an English speaker, a Dallas Seminary graduate. Now, on the other hand, if you're looking for a specific language church or a church that's not in a major metropolitan city, we often partner with our missions department. So sometimes with the World Missions Department, they hear about other openings, and also missions agencies, something like WEC, the World Evangelization Conference. So if it's a specific senior pastor role in a big city, a major world-class city, and it's maybe English speaking, we receive some of those. But generally speaking, a lot of our cross-cultural openings in other countries come towards us through missions agencies and the World Missions Department. And then I might add schools. We receive quite a few openings through international schools where they're asking you to serve as a teacher or a headmaster or something like that. So maybe either Autumn or Dr. Jerry Lawrence, do you want to add to that?
Sure. I would also say we do see some cycles of when churches or ministries post their positions. Sometimes it's the expectation in May, oh, we're going to be having graduates in May, so let's post a position now in May, but they're not always aware that we have graduates that are coming out in December. And so those different positions might pick up at different times of the year. And just another, while I'm thinking about it, usually around the holidays, things start slowing down, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's almost, we don't get as many positions posted with us, whether it's a church or a parachurch, because people just get busy during the holidays. And so maybe after the first of the year, when they're expecting, oh, we're going to have a new slate of graduates in May, not that y'all are all in, new graduates, but in their mind, their thinking is, oh, this is when more people will be available for us to interview. So that may be part of it in the mix. So.
Great, thank you both.
Welcome, sure.
Now, before we go to our next question, just another advertisement, another commercial. Meet with us, call us. You can make a Zoom appointment, a Teams appointment, a life-size appointment. You can meet for a cup of coffee if you're in the DFW area. We try to get to Houston. We're trying to get up to Washington, D.C., but schedule an appointment through Calendly with any of us and go on our website. You can see how amazing our website is with all of its information. Probably you'll get your question answered first from the website, and then after that, we're here to serve you. So we're not, averse to meeting with you more than once, looking at your resume more than once, chatting with you about compensation or interviewing skills. So that's what we're here for. All right, another question, another comment. Who will?
If I could add,
Paul, can I share something with Jason? I just posted it in the chat. The International Baptist Convention has staff openings website that it's not updated often, but there's normally 5 or 6 things there. And I found a couple of leads there. It's worth looking.
Thank you very much. I see that there.
All right, thank you for that. Autumn, go ahead.
It was also to Jason's question. Most of the positions we get that fit that are because we have also alumni serving there. So if you are looking for those international, always feel free to meet with us, because we may have some that aren't on the MOL just because they're sensitive or they're whatever else. But we may know of alumni who are serving in those positions and are looking, but don't necessarily want it posted. So that is all.
Yes, I forgot all about that. A lot of if they're in a dangerous country, they don't want their information being put out. They oftentimes don't want their name put out, or the name even of their missions organization or church. So a few of ours that are really in a closed country, we will network with you in a little bit more of a confidential way. So that's a great point. Some agencies don't post everything and want them all over the World Wide Web. All right, another question or comment someone want to raise for us so we can discuss these and put out accurate, timely information. Career services trends. What's happening out there recently and some of the changes?
Yeah, I'd like to hop on if that's okay. Okay, I just graduated in May and have gotten several interviews, and I feel like I'm a little bit in a kind of a no man's land I graduated THM, and then but I don't have a ton of ministry experience, paid ministry experience. Have volunteered with youth for years and years. And so it seems like I'm getting kind of put in this box of maybe more adult discipleship or teaching or pastoral positions. But then from the youth side, and then from the adult side, it's like, well, we really want to see more experience. And so I keep kind of in between. So I guess my question would be maybe just open-ended, any advice, and I might need to just make an appointment, and that sounds great. But I'm thinking along the lines of maybe, are there any fill-in preacher resources that maybe I could do to just fill in for a preacher, or get registered with an organization or something along those lines to try to build up more experience? At least that's what I'm hearing back.
Yeah, good question, Jordan. I've heard that often. Hey, you don't have enough experience to work here, but if you would give me a job and let me start working there, then I would have experience. It's like a vicious cycle. And you don't want to get frustrated. There's nothing worse than an argument during an interview. Okay, we want to avoid the argument during the interview. You don't want to look at the hiring person and say, well, if you would hire me, I'd have more experience. That usually doesn't go very far. So a couple of things, and I know Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Brown can add to this, and Autumn. Everything you do counts. We have some candidates that say, well, it wasn't a full-time position, so I didn't put it in there. Or I didn't get paid for it, so I didn't put it in there. If you've helped with Vacation Bible School, you need to add that. If you've helped with a church lock-in, put that in there. If you've written some things or spoken somewhere, add that in, maybe a URL link to your resume. So I remember back 30 years ago when I was doing this, I used to think, well, I wasn't paid, or I only did that for a summer or something. I'm not going to add that. But we found that a lot of people are leaving good activities on the table and they're not even bringing those up in the interview. And it also feels kind of selfish or prideful. It kind of feels like you're bragging. It kind of feels like, well, I don't want to, I'm a humble Christian. I don't want to tell all the things I've done. That's your one chance to really say, God has allowed me to do these things. You know what? If you've done it, it's not bragging. You're just sharing all the things God's done through you. And then finally, the last thing I would say is, yes, volunteer more often. Take every opportunity you can to do ministry. Go ask a pastor, could I serve in some area of your church while I'm building up my credibility, while I'm building up my resume? Could I teach a Sunday school class? Could I lead a small group? I don't think there's very many pastors in the DFW area that if you said, I'm a Dallas Seminary grad, I want to serve, volunteer or part-time, would you allow me to do that? Most pastors I know would say, oh, we would love to have you. We don't have a huge salary. We may not be full-time, but we would like to, if you're willing. And then it needs to be in your area of giftedness. What are you passionate about? We don't want to just have you mold yourself to fit the job description, but who is Jordan McKinney on the inside? What are your real gifts? How has God wired you? And you do ministry best out of who you are as a person. So those would be some of my brief answers, and I'll let some of my colleagues speak to this question as well. What do you do if you?
Oh, so Paul already muted himself, but I'll go ahead and add to this that Jordan, I would look at your resume, and many times people will put ministry experience and then a separate section for volunteer experience. We would say to combine the two together, because all experience, whether it's volunteer or paid, is considered ministry experience. So like when you do the missions trip, put that under your ministry experience, not just a separate miscellaneous type of a thing. So you incorporate all of those things together.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Welcome.
Good point. All right, we have time for maybe one more question.
That's right.
Who? Ray, go ahead. Ray, go ahead.
LA. Sorry, Dr. Pettit. Hey, I was trying to remember where that link is to finding out where the DTS grads in your local area, like, are doing ministry, to try to connect with some more people that we DTS family folk, like me out in Los Angeles, trying to figure out where my people at. So I know it's out there. I just forgot where it's at. So.
All right, Autumn. Autumn, you want to show us that? Here we go. We're going to the website and she'll walk you through this. Everybody needs this, not just Ray, because part of a key of finding a good position is networking. Talk to former classmates, talk to people who are alumni. An alumni will often offer an open hand, a hand up. They'll say, oh, you're a DTS grad? I want to at least have a cup of coffee with you. So everybody needs to know about this ability to use our maps under the resource tab.
So maps, super easy as an alumni. You have access to it. Everyone actually has access to it, which is great. So this will just show the churches that they're working at. It's not personal information, but resources, and then second option down, find alumni, and then find a church. So we're currently going through some technical changes. So school and counselor aren't up to date, but find a church kind of includes counselors and everything within it. So it'll pop up this map. You can go down. As you can imagine, there are quite a few, just a few in the DFW area. But yeah, so this is a great tool. If you're out in Rowlett, you can see alumni working at churches in the area. So this is a great tool. It's on the alumni website under resources, find alumni.
All right, great question from Ray in the heart of Los Angeles and looking for some DTS alumni out there. And you know, God always has a remnant. He will use. Well, thank you guys for jumping in with us. This has been a really helpful session, lots of good information. And we want to know that we're praying for you guys. We're taking you before the Lord. We're praying for God to open up doors. And we believe that God knows your phone number. God has not abandoned you. Even if you're a little bit discouraged or if you're frustrated, we have found so many testimonies of alumni that look back and say, you know, as I look back and map out what God's done in my life, God was opening doors all along the way. Oftentimes God has us in a holding pattern, but he's preparing us to do ministry in some area. So God bless you as you interact with us here at Career Services. And thanks for being a part of this session on career trends. God bless you. And don't forget to contact us and set up an appointment with us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.